Mutagenics has been certainly making the rounds, has been a great kind of gateway game for people first to learn about Emmett McMillan and also enjoy the joys, perils, and nightmares of tactical strategy and RPG decision making. And for today's critical thought, I want to talk about some of the challenges when it comes to balancing skills, choices, and whatnot in your game, and why something that sounds great or broken on paper may be completely opposite when it's in the player's hands. I was on social media, I saw that Emmett McMillan was responding to kind of posts and polls of people discussing their favorite and least favorite classes in Mutagenics, and he was a bit surprised by some of the ones that he felt or that he designed that were very powerful were kind of lower on the tier list. And it reminded me so much of some of the challenges that we talk about when it comes to balancing everything when it comes to a game. Your favorite class, skill, weapons, swords, belt buckles, Pokemon, minions, whatever you want to call them. Before we get to the topic at hand, I posed this question on social media. I want to throw it over to you folks here because it's a great kind of litmus test into your own thoughts and preferences when it comes to strategies and games. If you're building a character sight unseen for a game, let's say it's a strategy game, RPG, some kind of turn-based, and you have to decide between one of these three skills to assign to them, which one will you pick? Skill 1, your character will do 3 to 5 points of damage per hit. Skill 2, your character will do 1 to 10 points of damage per hit. Skill 3, your character will do 40 to 50 points of damage per hit, but every time you use a skill, there is a 10% chance that your character will die. Which one, without knowing anything else about the game or what the threats you're going to deal with, will you take? This is a great way to kind of look at, I guess in a way, how you like to play or what you think is important when it comes to playing a game or decision making. I'm in choice 1. Give me consistency above all else. If you chose choice number 2, you probably like a little bit of gambling or a little RNG. And if you chose choice number 3, then you are the high roller Russian roulette lover when it comes to your builds. For me personally, one kind of skill that I just never enjoy in any games are the consume all your mana, special points, whatever you want to call them, to get a skill multiply, so the X style of cards. But it's a great way to start looking at how different aspects of a game or different choices can be better or worse in the player's own mind. So as I said earlier, when it comes to deciding what skills, builds, whatever people like, there are several factors that are kind of being determined. And this is what you need to consider when you're building a game of your own. So the first one is kind of ease of use or usability in this respect. How easy, hard, simple, complicated is it to do this? Some games, you have to have 5-dimensional chess, all different cards, artifacts, buffs, perks, the time of day, the alignment of the moon, and whatever in order to make this build work. Or, play one card, does 500 damage, enemy dies, you win. It is common practice when it comes to balancing skills and decisions in games, that the more complicated something is, the more payoff there needs to be for it. Conversely, the easier it is for something to do, should not give you as much of a benefit or should be more straightforward. We can see this extended a lot into faction and character designs in a lot of games, where they will oftentimes have characters graded on complexity. So, the simple character, I smack you with a big sword or club. The advanced character, I have to perfectly adjust the elemental variances in the air to create different buffs and properties. The latter, on that, probably has a lot of interesting ways and is more challenging to play, and will often allow for more you can do with it. But of course, if you're just here to run around smacking enemies with a giant sword, that character is for you. And again, we can certainly look at this with the entire lens of classes in the Monster Hunter games. What you want to be looking at is whether or not all those advanced steps are really important, and is it rewarding enough to pull it off. Imagine a tactical strategy RPG game where a turn can go like this. I kick an enemy back into fire, causing them to get lit up. Then I use a grappling hook to pull them into oil. The oil lights on fire, causing an explosion. I have another character. When an opponent gets hit by a massive attack, they will immediately do an Overwatch hit. That Overwatch hit causes bleed, which causes another character to immediately charge at any bleeding opponents, pushing them in a different direction. That push knocks them to a wall of spikes, and that entire, Rube Goldberg-esque turn did maybe 20 points of an enemy's 600 health bar. And somewhere an SRPG fan is crying right now. You want there to be enough of a reward to make this justified. And to keep with this whole kind of strategy formula there, one of the things that always annoys me, and we talked about this in an earlier critical thought when it comes to pacing, is how a lot of developers are adding more fat or bloating out their pacing because they feel that complexity equals greatness. Instead of taking 20 seconds to make a turn, we need to add so much more so it becomes a minute, 2 minutes to do a single turn. Remember, time is not always going to be your friend when it comes to the pacing of your game. If the player can't figure out immediately, okay, is this choice better? Is this choice better? Is this one better? They're not going to want to consult 27 guides and watch 15 videos. And it's why information that is presented very cleanly and dynamic GUIs are very useful in this respect. Okay, if I use a skill, it's going to do this, this, and this. If I use this skill, it's going to do this, this, and this. Which one's going to help me? Which one's going to leave me with a better position? I'm going to go with that. You want the player, again, to always be knowing what their choices are going to impact. Which takes me to our next factor, and that is the consistency. This again goes back to the kind of design question I posed at the beginning. Do you like variance with your choices? When we talk about kind of a large number of games, this is not really so much of a factor. If I do 6 million versus 7 million damage, okay, if the enemy is still dealing with health in the millions of a pool, it's not really going to be that huge of a decision. But when we focus on low number design, then it becomes a far greater talk. If I can do between, for the original question, if I do between 3 and 5 points of damage to an opponent that has 10 health, if I get lucky, I kill that guy in 2 turns. If I get unlucky, then I'm killing him in 4 turns. And more turns the enemy has means more times they get to beat me up and leave me in a weakened state. Probability is, of course, the nightmare when it comes to decision making in 80 games, and especially when it comes to understanding what probability means, because as we all know, 90% success equals 150% for everyone that's not me. And I still have a grudge to someone who left a comment on my Arknights video who was arguing with me that having the pity grow at 2% per pull is perfectly fine, because no one would ever go to completely max choice because they're that unlucky. And they're telling you someone who has gone to max pity twice in Enfield. And let's not forget when I lost a 100% chance to hit in a game. I'm sorry. Let's not forget in Terra Invicta that on at least 3 separate occasions, I have missed the 99% success rate. In that game, that's a rare achievement. For me, that's just my everyday play. Because remember, anytime I have to do probability, there's at least a 50 to 70% weight against me. But to bring us back to the point about consistency, It's why having fixed elements or fixed nodes is a very important decision point for a lot of players, and when it comes to balance. As a very important case in point, we can look at stuff like the Firaxis XComs, where in the second one, you got the skill that allows you, I think it was a technician, who can just zap an enemy for 1 point of guaranteed damage. 1 point doesn't sound all that big of a deal. But again, in a game built on probability, where nothing is really guaranteed, at least in rare circumstances, being able to just say, if this enemy is down to 1 point of health, they are guaranteed dead, is a huge load off your mind. It is a guaranteed known when it comes to playing, and will make your life a lot easier. So you have to do something like do a run and gun, get behind the enemy with a shotgun at point blank range with a 95% chance to hit, and you still miss. Because that happened to me as well, and I almost threw out my computer tower in rage when that occurred. Being able to give the player consistent elements to keep track of is another, again, major point when it comes to balancing skills, and why in games that, especially in games built on probability, that giving the player something that is a guarantee will often come with a consequence or be a lot harder to use. Some games will make it do less or have less of an impact. Maybe we'll offer some kind of consequence, such as guaranteed damage to the enemy, but you take a point or two yourself. And as I said, people oftentimes have a hard time understanding how probability works. Just because something has a 90 to 95% chance does not make that guaranteed. And I am once again the proof of that. Now another factor, and this is kind of an extension of the kind of complexity that I mentioned earlier, is the reliability of making something happen. The more steps that are needed for a skill, a build, a strategy, whatever to work, means there's more room for it to not work. And it's another factor you need to be thinking about when it comes to designing your game and balancing various skills. And this will also kind of tie into mutagenics in a minute. The more that the player has to set up or has to happen for something to work can oftentimes lead to being very frustrating when it doesn't work. If I am making a fire-based character, I have a fire-based build, and I need the one super specific fire artifact, perk, whatever to drop, and all I get are earth artifacts, well, my entire build is basically gone down the toilet. If I get all that stuff, then the run is just so incredibly easy as I make a point of me thinking about. And you have to be careful when it comes to these kinds of very rigid strategies, that if I get A, B, C, and F, I'm unstoppable. If I get A, B, C, L, then my entire run is over, the game's horrible, I hate it, it's horrible to play, I'm never going to touch it again. And this, again, will kind of cut back to both mutagenics and the Biome Isaac in very different ways. The beauty of the Biome Isaac from an item generation standpoint, or from an item balancing point, and this goes with the interview that I had with Edmund, was that he was fine with keeping very spiky combinations in the game. If you wanted to get the sextuple bomb shot, if you want Mega Fetus with Brimstone and something else, go for it. Because he understood that the chance of basically lightning striking the same spot 20 times in a run was going to be very low. Someone out there could have gotten it. Maybe you're one of the few who got like the super RNG roll of perfection in the Biome Isaac. For a lot of people, you may have just gotten soy milk over and over again. And being able to make lemons out of soy milk is of course one of the challenges of these kinds of games. That when everything goes well, the run's going to be very easy. But what happens when it doesn't go well? How enjoyable is it to play the game? As I said, with the idea of having different artifacts and builds, that if an entire form of play or entire playstyle hinges on you getting one specific drop out of 20, 50, 800, then it's not really going to be enjoyable to do again and again. And it's why having kind of backup items or designing around a wider pool can lead to more interesting discussions. So, a game that I played a long time ago that I know a lot of people enjoy but I just could not get into was Teleglitch. This was a top-down action roguelike, and you're fighting enemies, shooting, knifing, whatever. And the thing that I remember the most out of that game was how frustrating the first 5 to 10 minutes of a run was. Because your knife is like one of those little knives where you stab like this. And of course you're being surrounded by 10 to 30 enemies at a time. And until you get your first gun, and more specifically get your first good gun, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. So every time a run ended, I had to go back to that very horrible state and hope that I get that one good weapon and then the run comes to life. A similar situation I felt was with Balatro, specifically when you're going up to kind of the higher difficulties, where it just felt like it got to a point of, did I get a really good Joker in the first kind of 2 matches of my run? Yes? Then I can keep playing. No? Just restart them because I'm not going to be able to kind of compensate for it. And that's always the challenge when it comes to balancing very powerful or not so powerful choices in your game. If something is God tier, but only 0.75% of the time, is it going to be worth it to keep it at that? But again, on the other end of the spectrum, if you have an item that is incredibly easy to get, that trivializes every piece of your content, then there might be an issue with that. Because while people will of course complain that something is too hard and I can't enjoy, I'm going to refund your game, you also have people who, they'll load the game, they'll get the super insta-kill game-ending build on their very first turn, then they'll say, well, I beat the game, it was incredibly easy, boring, then I don't need to play more, refund it, because, it's not that hard. Because if you look on every forum for any kind of strategy or tactical game, you will of course have that one person who will never understand why people are complaining about the game. I got every best choice on my very first run. I don't understand why people are having trouble with this, they just need to get good. Being able to reliably make use of something or have the game at least be enjoyable is one of the harder parts of balancing. And with Eugenics, one of the classes that a lot of people voted on the lower end of the scale was the mage or kind of sorcerer class. And I would also have said the same thing. Because every time I use the mage, or the majority of the time that I use the mage, they always felt like kind of the odd cat out. That I couldn't really use them in range because a lot of their skills I wasn't getting long range skills. If I put them in short range, they're not doing enough damage to deal with the enemy, so the enemy just walks up and smacks them with their lower health pools and almost kills them. But the reason why Edmund rated that class so high is that it has some very amazing skills. In one of my runs, I got the perk that whenever they use an elemental attack, it gets transferred to their basic shot. And then I pair that with the Tri-Elemental spell. So what ended up happening was every fight with it went like this. Begin the match using the Tri-Shot, and then my mage, for every one of their basic hits, just did lightning, burn, and slow damage for every single one of their attacks. It was great. But again, how often does that occur? People will of course always gravitate towards the path of least resistance. If I have to hope and hope to get the 5 perfect cards and items to make this build work, or just choose the class that hits really hard, has all the health, doesn't have to worry about dying, which one is going to be more enjoyable? But to get back to that point I mentioned a few minutes ago, let's say you do make all those incredibly powerful god tier skills very easy to acquire. Then you run into the problem where everyone was saying, well, this class is broken overpowered because I just choose one skill and then I beat every single thing with it. It is once again the nightmare when it comes to RNG. And speaking about the nightmare of RNG and skills, the final point, and this of course is one of the, I think, hallmarks that separates really great design balance from more frustrating: the utility that a skill provides. And this cuts at the overall balance of a game time and time again. How many RPGs have we played that introduce so many different kinds of debuffs, and then the bosses or elite enemies just completely shrug them off? Your stones, poisons, slows, speed ups, deaths, curses, you name it. And when we look at games that oftentimes do this, the reason is very simple. It would be broken if this boss would have been affected by that. But if you're designing skills that only work on half your enemies, or it doesn't allow you to progress all the way through, then they're not going to be valued as highly. As another point, how many RPGs have we played where you can charm, curse, poison, burn, freeze an enemy, but it's a percentage chance that will stick? Or I just use the summon the meteor from the heavens skill that does 900,000 points of damage and I kill the enemy in one turn. Which one do you think people are going to really enjoy? Utility is again a major aspect when it comes to balancing different skills. The more utility a skill or an item has, the more it's going to be valued by the players. Do I want the skill that has a 60% chance of healing my party? Or do I want the skill that guaranteed heals, provides defense ups, offense buffs, removes all ailments, gives everyone $50 just by using it every single time? And there's always so many different factors that go into these different skills and these different choices. Because as we've said, when you start throwing in additional options, things that modify skills, suddenly that utility can become very wide or very high or very low. Let's go back to the original question I asked you about the three choices, the 3 to 5, the 1 to 10, and the 40 to 50. If I introduce an artifact that you can choose for each one of these characters, or each one of these builds, would this influence your choice? So the first one, let's say we have an artifact that says, if you roll the minimum or maximum for your skill, times 3 damage. So what that means is that a 3 to 5 becomes a 9, a 4, or 15 points of damage for using a skill. For the second one, the 1 to 10, we'll do something similar. Let's say if you roll below a 5, your damage is tripled. So instead of it being 1 to 10, now it is 3, 6, 9, 12, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Suddenly you want to roll low, and if you do, you go really high. And then for the third one, for this artifact, your first instant death during a battle is nullified. So what that means is that you need to roll, or you need to get that 10% choice twice in a fight, instead of on one time, in order for it to bite you. Now, given those 3 modifiers, would that influence which choice you go for? Because now we're getting to some of the more interesting and some of the more challenging aspects of balancing skills and design. When you start creating things that interact. To bring us back to Mugenics, there are some crazily broken builds in that game. You get the right piece of equipment with the right passive and the right skill, and even the weakest, or quote-unquote weakest, class can become the absolute destruction of all life as we know it, Cat. And this is when we get into, again, a lot of the theory crafting and more interesting discussions when it comes to balancing. because the more ways that you can break a build, break things, change things, whatever, not only does it make it harder to overall balance your game, but it allows you to do a lot more. It widens the kind of possibility of success. With the earlier point about having like elemental builds, if you have an item that kind of corresponds to 2 different types of elements, or changes elements, or does something with that element that is not what it's normally known for, things become more and more open. But to wrap things up, this takes us to one final point about balance when it comes to skill design like this. Achieving perfect balance in a game is, well, impossible. You are never going to find a game where every single possible option, character, piece of equipment, build, whatever, will perfectly be viable 100% of the time, will have no chances of failure. Again, when we start looking at designs and builds that go beyond just pure numbers, when we start talking about the value beyond that into utility, consistency, and of course complexity, it becomes far more hard to put that into like a numerical balance, because things can be very different based on the situation at hand. If I'm playing a game where every enemy has 10,000 points of health, having a skill that consistently does 10 to 12 points of damage is not really going to be helping. That, one hit chance of you could die, but it does 10 times the damage, could very well be worth it. We're talking about enemies with hundreds of health points. Or the enemy's going to do something massively damaging on their next turn, but they're just one huge hit away from dying. Games where you can cause damage over time effects. In some games, DOTs are worthless. Wow, they take an additional 2 points of damage for their 90 points of health. We've played some games where you have a damage over time effect and they're taking like 20% of their health every single turn and you want to do a damn thing. Or you have cases where the damage over time grows every single turn, such as Bleed in Mugenics, where, okay, yeah, it starts at 1, if this fight keeps going, it goes at 5, 10, 20, 30, that is uninterruptible, cannot be healed easily, and the enemy just melts in front of it. Being able to look at how different choices, and by extension, different classes, different characters, whatever, can fare throughout your game is one of the more complicated aspects of strategy and tactical design. Again, numbers on paper are not the best judge. You can think that a skill that does 10 times more damage than everyone else in your game is going to be broken and overpowered, everyone's going to hate it. But if that skill takes 5 times as long to use, or the penalty is too great, people aren't going to go with that saver option. So the final point for this video leads back to one question that you need the player to be able to answer. How do I beat this game? What do I need in order to win? Do I need high damage to blitz the enemies down? Do I need debuffs to stop the enemy from powering up and destroying me? Do I need buffs or things that cure super nasty status ailments and effects? Whatever it is, the player needs to be able to A, get those choices, and B, be able to do it in a way that it is not feeling like it's completely at random that they have a chance of winning. If the boss has like the almighty I lift my hand up and everything takes 10 million points of damage skill, and there is one item out of 700 that counters it, then that means that the player has a 1 out of 700 chance that their run is going to work. But if there's multiple ways of getting past it, death resistance, buffing, knocking out the enemy, stunning them, whatever, then it becomes more viable. And this gets at kind of what a lot of people are finding about the joy of playing Mugenics. That there are some incredibly nasty bosses, but there's not a single boss in the game, at least that I've seen yet, that the game just basically says, you must do exactly this, and this, and bring these specific classes, or this fight's unbeatable. I've won with some very weird combinations, I've had close calls, I've had amazingly easy wins, and a lot of that again goes back to the kind of balancing in the masterclass of balancing the different skills throughout the game. That again, everything has a moment in the sun. That under the right circumstances, a skill that you thought was horrible could be amazing, a skill that you thought was amazing could be horrible. And there are ways of building things up, down, left, right, whatever, that can make things exciting, weird, game-breaking, horrible, and any other adjectives that you can imagine. But the point is that there is never just one answer. That if you don't do this one specific thing, then you're never going to win. And it still has to feel good to use. If your strategy takes 87 turns to succeed, that player better be feeling really excited about taking that amount of time. Because if they see that the other strategy gets done in 2 turns, they're not going to be too happy and have to repeat the entire 8-dimensional chess plan again and again. So for you watching this, besides the questions I post throughout this video, can you think of examples of games that did a great job of circumventing the kind of one build play? That this boss, this enemy, this ending can only be achieved if you do X. And can you think of games that did something like very different? Or that, yes, they may have designed a boss to be a specific way, but the player base found the workaround. Maybe it was one the developer knew, maybe it's one that they had no idea that even existed. Let me know about that down in the comments. And if you do have all that amazing luck and you hit every one of your 5% chances to succeed, or you get every 7-star character you've ever wanted, let me know how great that is as well, and how great that feeling must be. But with that, come back for some more design videos with maybe a higher chance of great design talks coming soon. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you enjoyed the video, do the YouTubing stuff, be sure to visit our Discord and Patreon, and you're interested in more in my thoughts on design, check out my game design books.